Good morning. We are here with Jacob Severn, who is recently back from Macedonia, our resident, and he has, as our residents do, spent a month doing all kinds of disparate activities, and here to be grilled about them. The first thing I often will ask people, Jacob, is what anxiety they had and what expectation they had before they left.
I had a lot of anxiety and almost no expectation. There's of course the anxiety involved in leaving your life behind for a month in general, leaving my apartment and job and things here. And I think that my a lot of anxiety was wrapped up in the lack of expectation. I think that there was sort of a question of what am I doing, what am I going to do, and being completely thrown into this new environment that I knew very little about, and about which I felt ill-equipped to try to learn about quickly, or I felt like it felt like trying to quickly learn about it would even hinder me at that point, and so going in sort of blind in a way.
Yeah, I think it's good. It's kind of exciting for people. We don't encourage people to do a lot of research because it generally doesn't apply. So one of the kind of cycle things that we find is something you just alluded to. The first week, people are kind of like, what am I doing here? Why am I here? Home was so comfortable, and this is a little crazy. And then the second week, you begin to get a little familiar, you know where to get breakfast, things like that. And then by the third week, you're kind of feeling, pretty comfortable, and the fourth week is the anxiety of leaving. Did this kind of follow through, and can you tell me something about each week in terms of that sensibility?
Oh, certainly, yeah. The first week I felt a lot of, many times I had the urge to email you guys here and say, like, am I doing this right? Like, am I engaging correctly, or am I? Because I was unsure exactly what I was doing, and unsure what the outcome would be. I felt so thankful whenever I would meet with someone and they sort of understood, or at least pretended to understand what I was doing there, because I felt a lot of anxiety around having to explain myself, because a lot of people would ask, why are you here? What are you doing here? What is the end goal? Because it's difficult for a lot of people to wrap their heads around. It's difficult for me to wrap my head around as well, I found. But then I became more comfortable with it, especially more comfortable with the physical landscape of the city and the social landscape of how interaction happens there. And then by the end of it, I felt like I hadn't had enough time. It was by the time I had spent 10 or 11 days there, I was sort of still feeling like, what am I doing? And then by the time I had spent 15 or 16 days there, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm leaving soon. I have to do something. I don't know. The trajectory was a very a tight peak, I guess, of feeling like I knew what was going on, and then all of a sudden feeling like I was going to be ripped out of it in some way. It was tough to get there, and it was tough to leave.
So when people asked you, or when you explained what you were doing there, what did you tell them?
using the word fellowship tended to not help because people have certain expectations of what art fellows or writing fellows are supposed to do when placed in a new context. That you're supposed to be working on things or producing something, and using the word residency didn't really completely describe it either. And so I think what was most helpful is just to be as open as possible with people and just say, I'm just here to experience things. Each activity I participated in, I would just say, I'm just here to do this right now. I'm just here, I took things really one step at a time. So I had, 3 or 4 things I was doing each day, and each time I would just approach it as, well, I'm here to do this for now, and then in 3 or 4 hours I'll be doing something else, and I'll be here to do that. So I think that the language barrier may have had something to do with it, but people were very easy to communicate with there for the most part. I think the major difficulty was in people understanding it in the context of it being a fellowship, because there's usually some product that comes out in their experience.
We have wrestled with terminology interminably. Resident had people expecting a studio and a traditional situation. Fellowship, aside from being a sexist term, I have trouble referring to people as fellows. It does create that preconceived. So short of arts traveler or cultural flaneur, any suggestions you have, we would be happy to think about incorporating.
People were most accepting of the term cultural exchange, probably, but that I know is something that is not entirely really what you're going for. So I was hesitant to use that term as well. But yeah, people do understand resident or exchange, but then there is some kind of I think that I borrowed the term alternative education, which I think was maybe closest to what I felt like I was doing, an alternative education program.
So did you feel that the confusion about the intent of our program became clear to you at the end of the program or at some point during it?
I felt like it. Yes, I felt like it sort of improved the things became clearer as I went on, but also I think that things became clearer in blips, kind of. Within each activity I participated in, something small would happen, some kind of small connection would happen, and I would try to note it in my mind, be it something I noticed about the culture or some kind of connection that I formed with a person with whom I was meeting, and it would and the purpose of the fellowship would really coalesce and make sense within that moment. And then when I was going to bed at the end of the day, I would have to cycle back through everything I'd experienced that day and kind of make sense of it all. But I felt like I tried to approach each thing anew simply because I didn't want to try to imagine this culture that was completely new to me as a single thing. I didn't want to be reductive about it, I suppose. I wanted to be open about it, and I wanted to imagine it as many things, as I know that, because I know that culture encompasses many things, and even to approach something by calling it a different culture is somewhat reductive.
There's a hierarchical kind of situation that we try to keep from happening. Generally in the arts, you go somewhere and you're introduced as the writer or the artist, and this unequal situation kind of develops. And we try very hard not to elevate the people you're meeting with, not to elevate you, but to keep everybody on kind of an even plane so that there isn't that posturing or ego thing as much as possible. Did you find that to be an alienating or comforting feature?
Well, it definitely is an expectation that seems unavoidable in some way, because by being presented as someone who is an artist or a writer who has been brought over with someone else's money and has taken their own time to participate in this program, that implies a certain amount of luxury, and it is luxurious. It's luxurious to be able to take a 12th of your year and travel to a new place simply to experience something. It's luxurious to have activities paid for by someone else. So there's definitely a hierarchy that implied that I think was certainly a context in which every interaction was based on, but
unavoidable
in a way, yeah, certainly. But I did feel definitely the pressure to break through that barrier and try to just more or less just be very open and accepting of everything I was doing, and approach everything on the exact same level, and approach each thing as it really just helps to imagine it as school, to think about, I'm doing this because it's on my schedule, and I'm doing this I'm doing this thing that I would not have thought of doing were it not presented to me on my schedule. So in that way, that sort of helped to put everything on kind of an even keel, I guess.
To the chagrin of real educators, we really do like to think of our program as an educational program. We don't say it too much because people who are really in education get offended that we're playing school, but we think that it actually is very effective in that capacity.
Yeah.
Give me an example of an activity that you would not have normally done, but that you found particularly interesting or compelling, or you'd do again.
Well, some of the volunteer work that I was doing there,
For the sex workers.
it was particularly that, I think, the outreach with sex workers, which presented that was actually where I felt the greatest hindrance in terms of language barrier, simply because most of the people I came across did not speak English, and my Macedonian is pretty solid F-. So I mean, I had language lessons while there, but it was, and I understood some things about the language, but for the most part, I was completely lost. And I think that that outreach work is because of the language barrier. I was not able to engage on the same level that the other outreach workers were, and not only because of the language barrier, but also because of the relationship, and because I was an American man coming in, and there's this sense of like, who's this guy? What is he doing here? And so I found it very very enlightening, though, and very fascinating. There was this idea among one of the sex workers that I spoke to that like I was. She saw me as kind of like a cultural ambassador or something, and she was like, "You need to tell people that we matter, and you need to tell people that there are certain rights that sex workers don't get." And then I was sort of and certainly I that is something that I do tell people, but it certainly sort of threw me off, because I just had to ask myself, how do I tell people this? How do I get this point across of what is my responsibility in this? So, and I'm still not really sure.
Well, you just sit here very nicely.
So, yeah.
Compare and contrast that situation in the U.S. to what you encountered. Would you consider what is the religious breakdown in Macedonia?
It's a very Orthodox Catholic country. There's a giant cross up on the hill. That's, I think, is the largest cross in the world. Although it might be on par with the one in Brazil. But the iconography behind that Orthodox religion is very, very present, and it's everywhere. And there are churches that date back to the 9th century, and they've been through 500 years of Ottoman rule too. So so at a certain point, many churches were converted to mosques, and they were converted back, and then there was communism, which during which some of the saints' eyes in fresco paintings were scratched out, and there's definitely this idea that the Orthodox religion has been under attack in some way. There's also a large Muslim population as well, and there are many mosques. So those like the Orthodox population is huge, and then there's a large Albanian minority as well, which is mostly Muslim.
Sophia is very interested in the Jewish issues that existed in Macedonia.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any Jews in Macedonia now?
Yeah, certainly there are. It was something that that Sophia talked to me about. Sophia Grandakowska was so wonderful while I was there. I met up with her a few times, a former apexart fellow, and she is very very interested in this idea of this of the there were I think apologize if this is slightly off, but I think 7,142 Macedonian Jews died in the Holocaust, and now but the visiting the Holocaust memorial there was very new to me, because I was unaware of the politics in the region, really, and what Sophia kind of had a negative view of how Holocaust history had been treated by there was this official Holocaust history that had to do with the country's relationship with Bulgaria, and this kind of tension with Bulgaria's cooperation with Germany, and that this still feels very, very tense and very, very unresolved. That said, I didn't feel that Jews were a large presence among me. The dominating narrative of the country was one of Christianity and of Orthodox religion.
Politics, big issue there.
Yeah.
Sophia stays. Many other people leave. Would you stay?
I felt, I get a question from pretty much everyone that I met. How do you like it here? And I was really enjoying my time, but I felt a lot of pressure to not be the American imperialist who comes in and says, "Oh, it's great here, I love it, like everything's so cheap and everyone's so nice." And because I would tell people I really love it here, and everyone would look at me sideways like, "No, you don't. Like, nobody loves it here." And or not everyone. Many people. The line I would get most often is living here is great. Life here is hard. And I really felt like I would love to stay more. But I was also in a bubble in a way. The program was so scheduled and so structured for me that I felt like I did not feel like I was a tourist. I felt like I was there with a purpose, and maybe if I was there as a tourist, then I would feel originally the eastern part of Macedonia is going through a major change where all of the young people are leaving. But about a third of the country lives in Skopje, and every event that I went to, every large public event that I went to, or small public event in Skopje, just felt so alive. Like there were felt like 200-300 people at everywhere I went, and people seemed so involved in the city life and the cultural life there, and of course that's a symptom of it being a slightly smaller city, and there are only a certain amount of things going on each night. But people did go out, and I felt like walking around the streets, it seemed like a very young, vibrant city. There were young people everywhere, and they all seemed to be doing interesting things. But I was told by most people that I talked to about that was false. That people are leaving in mass quantities, and that the only reason I saw so many young people around was because of the rise in private universities, which most people there regarded as garbage. There are about 10, 15 private universities that have popped up there in the past 10, 15 years. So, and that was the youth unemployment rate in Macedonia is between, it's like over 25% now. The government claims that it's gone down, but that's partially because so many people have left the country. I would love to stay. I would love to go back, but I think that most people who live there would say that that's fantasy.
It's an interesting thing. One of the primary purposes of the program is that we feel a lot of artists have become observers, writers, people in the US, that we tend not to participate, but we have this raised position of being the observer. And we want very much to get people to participate rather than elevate. You did a lot of outdoor activity. Mm-hmm. You did a lot of walking. You walked up a hill for miles.
Yeah.
Is this part of what made it feel so connected? The fact that you were outside of New York being kind of a totally different environment.
Yeah, definitely. I'm originally from Seattle, Washington, which is a really outdoorsy place. I hate that term, outdoorsy. But everyone there is involved in hiking and in being in the outdoors. It's kind of, people think of it as like a city in the middle of the woods or something. So I had been exposed to that in the past. That said, I'm very happy to not go outdoors. It's not something that naturally comes to me. I just enjoy the outdoors, but if I spend a long time in the city, I don't long for nature necessarily in the way that many people do. So it was something that was new for me. I talked to many people who I met who told me that they were frustrated politically or socially in the city, would tell me that one of the things that keeps them sane there is the nature. There's Vodno is the mountain that's right on the edge of town, which is about a 15-minute walk from the apartment in which I was staying, and so I could walk for 20 minutes and be walking up a mountain, and that was something that I did do a few times while I was there early in the morning, but I really felt like I was pushing myself to do that and pushing myself to experience that, because that's what people told me they did in order to stay sane there. And people told me they went there every single morning, and it was just a natural activity for them. And it's something that I really had to force myself to do, but it's also a position that I knew I would not be in otherwise. So the way in which the physical landscape there is involved in history. When I went to Ohrid and on the edge of the country, and then went up Galicia, which is a mountain there, and got to see places where World War I battles were fought, and it's just and it's not presented as history. It's just a pile of rocks there. It's not there's no. I have this experience of history in the United States, the very brief history of the United States, as being all behind velvet ropes and inside of glass, and there it's just up there on the mountain, a pile of rocks. So And I wouldn't have really known unless someone had told me that that's what happened there. So since there is so much past there, it feels like it feels like everywhere you look, there's it's something important.
Had you been in a real Eastern European place before?
Not at all.
Because our sense of Europe is Western Europe and a very different place.
Yeah, definitely. Most people there would make the distinction of not calling Macedonia Europe. And they would say, have you been to Europe before? I would say, oh, I've been to Spain and France and Germany. And they would say, no, that's Europe. This is the Balkans. Like, you're in a totally different place now. And I felt like people were trying to legitimately prepare me, and also maybe trying to freak me out a little bit. And it was definitely a very different thing. But also, when I had been in those Western European countries, I had also been there as a tourist. So it was unlike anything I'd experienced in Western Europe.
The lack of Western value, advertising, all of these things is a great opportunity to rethink a lot of what we so easily think about here as being normal. I mentioned to you that I wanted to ask you about the political correctness or the lack of political correctness you find when you go to these places and people are really openly judgmental, critical, but they make lots of interesting comments that we are so politically correct. We might think, but we can't utter. Does anything come to mind that sort of shocked you, or something that somebody just came out and said and you were like, huh?
I definitely, before I left, when I was speaking to you maybe a month before I left, and you said the nice thing about Eastern Europe is that it's not Western Europe, and I thought about that a lot, because it is, in a certain way, I thought that was nice, and in another way, I thought, well, maybe that's not what everyone thinks here. Maybe that's an easy thing to say for someone who doesn't live there, but there were ways in which people seem to enjoy the unrefined qualities of not being so used to commercialism and all these Western ideals that we have. But I think that there were, I mean, politically, people are just incredibly open to, actually, the use of the word Nazi is in reference to someone who is not part of any Nazi-related
not a Nazi
party. Not a Nazi.
Right.
is really open there. Not necessarily, I definitely don't want to generalize, but people were very open and unapologetic to calling people Nazis when these people weren't necessarily Nazis. And I thought a lot about that, and about how, there has to be some kind of history that's contributing to that. And there were certain attitudes that some people I met had that sort of maybe mirrored some attitudes here about what we here would call welfare, and specifically attitudes about the Albanian minority there that I found kind of shocking, but was not did not feel educated enough to speak on at all. So you know, I would have to just kind of accept what people were telling me. But some people I met, and definitely not all, were pretty open about expressing some kind of anti-Albanian sentiment that was similar to how you might hear some people here talk about the welfare state, or talk about people on welfare and being quote-unquote lazy. That was actually kind of shocking to me, and that wasn't across the board, but it did occur when I was speaking with a few people who otherwise I would have completely agreed with. But again, I felt no authority to speak on it.
Albanians definitely need a new PR agency.
Yeah.
They get a very bad rap in the world, to be sure. I haven't been to Albania, and we did have a curator who was here, and I, as you're expressing, I'm pretty ignorant about what's happening there, but I'd like to know more. Okay, so let's talk about people for a minute. The main person who was your leader was Jovanka?
Jovanka Popova.
Okay, and it seems like she did a pretty nice job.
She did an amazing job of not only of setting up all of my appointments and making sure they were on track, calling everyone, making sure that everyone was ready to meet me, was debriefed on my situation, but also in just more or less taking care of me, more or less making sure that I was that I didn't have any problems there, and being very open to any questions that I had. I definitely felt like she is a person with a job and a life, and I shouldn't necessarily bother her with anything. So I definitely felt this desire to be independent, but she was wonderful at making me feel welcome and accepted, and at the same time making me feel like I was on my own in some way.
To that, we have to give some credit to Elizabeth in terms of directing Jovanka, you know. So that was really good.
Yeah, I mean, I think she was mostly just afraid that something really bad would happen to me, that I would, you know, on the part of of her and Yana Cholovsky, who works with her at the Press to Exit Project Space. They were, I think, mostly just afraid that I would die.
What did you think was the most perilous thing that you did?
Let's see.
They were just generally afraid you'd die.
Yeah, they were just generally afraid. I think that the most perilous thing that I almost did that I didn't end up doing was riding a bike there. There was a big discussion about bicycling. I'm a cyclist here in the city. I have been riding my bike here for years, and I really love it, and it's how I get around. It's my connection to the city. That's what, and I felt strange about asking about riding a bike there, because I thought maybe I should divorce myself from this comfort of having a bicycle. But also, it's just a completely different landscape there. And my biggest fear, though, was that I would not be able to make it to a certain appointment if I had to rely on the bus or something, or rely on walking. And I tried not to rely on taxi cabs. So their fear though was that I would be hit by a car and die on a bicycle, because pedestrians and cyclists in the city are killed almost every day. So
Not a good relationship between drivers and cyclists.
no, the
and
traffic
cyclists.
there was just insane. There seemed to be very, very little going on in terms of rules for drivers. I mean, in terms of rules being enforced for drivers. I was told that the opinion of bicyclists had greatly improved in the past 10 years. That it used to be something that you only did if you were very, very poor, and now many people ride bicycles. And that's sort of you can see a similar trajectory happening in other cities. But
Did you see professional cyclists all dressed up and such?
not really. I saw many people on bicycles, but most of them were just average Joes and Janes riding bicycles. And it's one of my major regrets there was not pursuing a bicycle, because every week I told myself, oh, I should really get on that bicycle thing. And it was definitely one of the things that I didn't end up accomplishing there. But I was, and also because I knew that you guys here and them had been in conversation about it, so I felt like I would have been wasting your time that you spent on that conversation by not getting a bicycle.
The way we would do it is if you said to us, my bike is my normal way of getting around, we would have said don't bike. Because we're basically contrarian in all of the things that we have people do. So anything that will make you feel more comfortable, we say, don't do it. So that worked out well. We're seeing light at the end of the tunnel, by the way. So, but I wanted to ask you about your encounters with somebody, not somebody in particular, but what was a particularly notable encounter that you had, not with the folks that were administering to us, but the folks that you met either by appointment or just met on the way?
Well, I had a few encounters that were one of the most sort of inspiring encounters I had was something that was scheduled for me with this journalist Kesharovsky, who had been thrown in jail for speaking out against the current government. And he was a really fascinating guy, mostly for having gone through something very horrible, but seeming so accepting and open of me and of speaking to me, and it was just a very interesting dude. But I think that when I was in Ohrid, I ran across this guy who was known by my host there in Ohrid, who was a really inspiring woman named Elena Arsova, who was the first Macedonian woman to climb Mount Everest. And we ran across this guy who she knew, who asked me if I wanted to know who I really was. And I said, sure. And he said, are you going to pay me? And I said, yeah, sure. How much does it cost to know who you really are? And he said, it's whatever you think it's worth. And then he told me that I was a spiritual being of light, and that I had to return to the lake, and sort of gave me this speech that was very much a calculated speech. He wasn't speaking off the cuff. You could tell he'd memorized it. But it was, and then when well, we parted ways. Alina told me that he was, the first hippie to show up in, and I really, I'm so open to those encounters, chance encounters like that. And anytime anyone wants to speak to me about something, I'll be I'll be very open to it.
Here, everywhere, or are you saying there?
Everywhere, but I felt that as I've gotten older, I've become less accepting, and I think that I don't know what that's a symptom of, but I was very glad to have had that because I definitely felt like something that I had been missing. That said, I ran into a guy near the center square in the middle of town who started speaking to me about Kosovo and about Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton and bombing and wars, and I was agreeing with him on a lot of things, and then all of a sudden he said, "I'm a white supremacist," and started spouting off this went on this screed, and I just told him, like, I don't have to talk to you. I really don't agree with anything you're saying right now, and I'm going to leave. And so and it really made me realize that I'm willing to speak with someone up to a certain point, and then I will just abandon the conversation if I don't agree.
Manners shouldn't transgress something that is personally offensive. You shouldn't be obligated to be nice to somebody who is clearly not such a nice person.
Yeah.
Okay, so I always like to ask about food, just because when people travel, sometimes they find something, a local, something that they weren't expecting, and it was either really good or it was really bad. And how was the non-westernized food experience?
It was great. I ate a lot more meat than I'm used to eating. It's a very hot region in the summer, so they grow a lot of vegetables, but a lot of the locally grown best vegetables were not in season when I went there. And I was vegetarian for about 8 years, but I've been eating meat for quite a while now, and so but I tend to just not eat meat usually, just by default. And I ate meat probably every day I was there. I really, really liked everything I tried. But there's a lot of meat and a lot of bread involved in their cuisine. Everything was really affordable for me. So probably my favorite thing that I got for breakfast many times was burek, which is different in different countries. It's not just relegated to that one country, but across Eastern Europe, but they do it in this very specific way. This have you ever had it? It's fried dough that's stuffed with cheese or meat or spinach or something else, and it was about $1, and I definitely could see myself just gaining 15 pounds if I had stayed there any longer.
Good bread?
Yeah, really good. And everything there was really good. I think that the amount that the diet focused on meat was something that my body wasn't necessarily used to. But
generally fresher than here, though. Yes?
Oh yeah, and also that's what the cheese was. I really have to find this Macedonian cheese here because it was so much. The closest thing that we would have here is probably there's the white cheese there, and the closest thing that we would have is like feta. But there it was so much saltier and so much more flavorful, and
Like halloumi? Do you know halloumi cheese?
it was, and someone was telling me, I don't know how much truth there is to it. Someone was telling me that in general, things there are a lot more flavorful because they're not part of the EU and are not subject to certain restrictions on food, which I don't have any proof of, but would seem logical considering that's many people's explanation for why American food is so bland, because we have these trade regulations that pump our food full of hormones and different agents that not only are bad for you, but also like make the taste experience much less delightful. So,
Yeah, apparently a lot of dairy products that were made in countries were affected by the EU and the homogenization and all of these processes, much to the chagrin and maybe health of people, I don't know.
yeah, it's definitely, it seemed like it definitely seemed like a logical conclusion.
Okay, well, we are going to wrap up. I will just ask you if you have any final observation or it seems like it was a good opportunity for you and you certainly got a lot out of it.
I certainly got a lot out of it. I returned on Sunday, and it's it's been a little less than a week, and I wanted to do this talk as soon as possible. Since I returned, I've been sick, and so things are still coming together in my mind from the trip. I'm still kind of assembling everything, but one of the things that I've noticed is that there's no logical assemblage that things fall into, because that's just life. That's just there are certain narratives that I pulled out of my experience there, but that's me. That's my organization of the experience. The experience is just experience, and I have to really force it into these particular vectors, I guess. So, there's a really dominant narrative there of identity, and there's a lot of political sentiment, but I'm still kind of organizing it all.
And your desire to take your mate back to Macedonia?
Yeah, I really want to go back as soon as possible and sort of be able to spend more time there and see more of the region. The way in which my employment situation is structured right now is very difficult to spend any extra time there, but so many people there tell me, oh, you have to see this, you have to see that. But if I went back, I really would want to spend as much time in Skopje as possible, because I met so many fantastic people, I saw so many fantastic things, and I feel like now when people ask me, where have you lived in your life, I can say that I've lived in Macedonia. Like I don't regard, even though it was only a month, I don't regard it as a visit. I regard it as a place that I've lived and a place that I really want to return to. And I think that my wife Rebecca and I are going to be back hopefully as soon as possible, but not in the summer, because I heard the summers are nightmarishly hot.
They deal with it.
That's true.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Welcome back, and good that you had a great experience.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. It was phenomenal. Just I can't imagine a better experience.
That's a wrap.